With the fantasy season behind us, let's take a look at 5 players that either broke out or exceeded expectations in 2024, and how repeatable is that going to be in 2025. First, let's take a look at Tee Higgins, and it feels weird to say Tee Higgins broke out in year 5, but that's the truth. Tee Higgins averaged over 19 points per game. He's currently the wide receiver 5 in points per game this season. His previous career high, only 15.7 points. Now, what led to that jump? Did Tee Higgins suddenly become better? Well, I think he's growing and getting better as a wide receiver. That's true. But also, the personnel on the field shifted dramatically this season compared to the first 4 seasons he had in Cincinnati. Without Tyler Boyd, this team just wasn't running as much 11 personnel. Even last season, Tyler Boyd's last year with the Bengals, they ran 11 personnel 72% of the time. That would have been the 5th highest rate in the NFL. This year, that 11 personnel grouping drops to 58%. They are right in the middle of the NFL at that point. What does that mean for Tee Higgins? Well, it meant wide receiver target share got consolidated greatly, and that led to significantly more usage. He saw a 20% target share his first 4 seasons. He saw a 27% target share this year in 2024. And when it came to total targets seen amongst the wide receiver group as a whole, he averaged a 30% wide receiver team target share the first 4 years. That jumps to 41% this season. So all in all, there was just less competition, and Tee Higgins has, obviously taken advantage of it. Health is still a concern. It's always a concern with Tee Higgins. But when he's on the field, he's proven, look, he can be a wide receiver 1. He can be a top 5 guy in fantasy, and that's the exciting part. That's the part that I think may be repeatable, right? Seeing that ceiling is important for us after all these years of hoping Tee Higgins could be so much more. So I think the breakout in 2024 is legitimate, and I don't think we go back. I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle here. If he stays with the Bengals, I don't expect them to add or really spend a bunch at wide receiver again, because it'll be him and Jamar Chase. The personnel groupings are going to be similar. You'll see a similar season, maybe not top 5, but top 10 from Tee Higgins. If he ends up leaving, let's just look at the top 2 teams he's projected to go to right now. The Los Angeles Chargers, the New England Patriots. While personnel and players on your team are obviously going to drive who's on the field and what groupings you roll with, if we look at 2024, both the Chargers and the Patriots sat at 57%. That's below the 58% mark the Bengals had this year. And you could argue adding Tee Higgins may change that dramatically, but I don't think either of these teams, Chargers and Patriots that is, make enough additions to warrant them running a ton of 11 personnel. They'll be sitting in a lot of 12 again, or a lot of 13 personnel. That's going to benefit guys like Tee Higgins moving forward. Now, number 2, also a very, very late breakout here, and that's Terry McLaurin. And again, he's 29 years old, and we saw the best version of Terry McLaurin this year. Supposedly. I think that's what it feels like, right? But when you really dig in, after his dud week 17, he finished averaging only 15.5 points per game. And yes, that is a career high. That's his best since 2020 when he averaged 14.8 points per game. It's not really a huge breakout when all the dust had settled here, right? Finishing as wide receiver 16 isn't really anything to be all that excited about in terms of what it felt like Terry McLaurin was doing. And the reason being is, look, he scored 12 touchdowns. That's obviously impressive. That is hard to do. That's nothing like any of his seasons previous. When you look at what he just did in terms of usage this year, though, it all kind of tracks the same that we've seen from Terry McLaurin. It's actually worse than what we've seen previously. His 22.4% target share, second worst mark of his career. His 22.1% target rate, middle of the road, right? Third lowest in his career. But that 11.4% touchdown rate, that's the holy grail for fantasy. That's what you care about. The problem is, that's not really all that repeatable. His career touchdown rate is 4.1%, and that's skewed by quarterback play. Obviously, Jayden Daniels is the best quarterback he's played with. He will be with Jayden Daniels for the foreseeable future. All of that is true. But if you're not getting the high volume usage, again, right, 105 targets in 16 games, if you're not getting the high volume usage, can you really just bank on touchdowns? Maybe, but I don't think it's a good bet to make. So for that, I think this season was great for Terry McLaurin. I don't think it's repeatable. I don't think you see a massive target share jump in 2025. This was part of the reason I was worried about him going into this season. I had him as a sell because I just didn't expect a spike in touchdowns, especially with a rookie quarterback. Now, maybe Jayden Daniels gets better. This team passes more. There's a lot of outs. There's a lot of narratives you can make. But at 30 years old, it's really difficult to make that bet, I think. I think you can trade Terry for a first-round pick right now. Maybe it's a late first. But I think you can get out for a first plus even. And that's a move I'm trying to make if I'm not an immediate contender this offseason. So those are things to consider. Terry McLaurin had a good year. I just don't think it's going to be repeatable. Now, let's get to a more traditional breakout, I think. You have a year two Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And it's really a tale of two seasons here, a tale of two halves. The first half of the year, I'm saying legitimately the first 8 games, 21% target share, 17 game pace for 91 receptions, 825 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11.2 points per game. That was about the point, I think, if we go back and look at 5 moves to make, it's about the point I was like, look, it's not going to happen for JSN. It just didn't feel that way. You had 8 games. It was just an extension of the previous season. And then week 9 hit and everything changed for JSN. The Seahawks remembered we spent a high first round draft pick on him. He's talented. He was great at OSU. He can be a wide receiver 1. And that's exactly what he was from week 9 on. 28% target share, a 17 game pace of 1,555 yards, 112 receptions, 10 touchdowns, 19.8 points per game. He became the wide receiver 1. He was the most important player on this offense, and everything ran through JSN. I don't think you go back. I don't see how you can go back. Tyler Lockett is older, maybe heading to retirement. He really faded down the stretch. DK Metcalf also faded down the stretch as well and really turned into a 2, not even really a 1B. I think he was the clear-cut 2 behind Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I mean, I just expect them to bring back Geno. I expect Ryan Grubb to stay. The situation is going to be nearly identical, and JSN is their best receiver at this point. He is the most dynamic. Obviously, DK Metcalf has a ton of positives and is a good player in his own right, but JSN does things that DK cannot. And when you have a guy like that, you feature him often. Right? At this point, Jaxon Smith-Njigba has a case to be a top 10 wide receiver in Dynasty. That tier is a little muddy, right? From maybe wide receiver 8 or 9 down to like wide receiver 12 or 13. Put him somewhere in that pocket and he deserves to be there. Because the second half of this season was nothing short of, spectacular. And that's what we expected of him once this offense sort of worked itself out and, he rose to the top of that group. Now, getting over to the running back position, I want to look at Chase Brown because, look, Chase Brown has been a revelation. He was on our Dynasty stash list at the end of 2023 last year, and he delivered. He was, a running back 1. He was unbelievable. However, before the Zach Moss injury, it took a little bit of time to get there. Before the Zach Moss injury, he had a 39% snap share, an 8% target share, and he had 51% of the running back carries. None of that screams star workhorse running back. However, his rush percentage, his workload grew every single week from week 1 until that injury to Zach Moss. It was week over week. He started at 25%. He peaked at 71% in Zach Moss's final game. So this was always headed to Chase Brown. I think the writing was on the wall. He was just the better player, the better running back. After the injury, that's where things just went insane. In terms of usage, 85% snap share, 13% target share, 95% of the rush attempts among running backs, and he averaged 20.6 points per game. That's a star. That's a star running back in terms of fantasy production. I don't think that's likely to happen again next year. Is Chase Brown good? Yes. Is he a good receiver? Yes. Do the Bengals want to give him a 95% workload? Probably not. I don't think that's reasonable for any running back to really sustain that kind of work, especially back-to-back years. I think that's dangerous. That's not how they even came into the year expecting to use him. I expect competition to be added here. And the main reason is everything we listed already is great. What we didn't talk about is his success on the 1 or 2 yard line this season. 12 carries for -5 yards, 4 touchdowns. That is the third worst rate, right? 33% conversion rate in the NFL. That's a problem. That is not something that you can win with. And some of that's on the offensive line, of course, and some of it's on Chase Brown. Some of it's on the play calling. It's a mix of it all. But that is something they will probably look at in the offseason and say, can we improve? And I think the answer is yes. I think they can probably find a running back that maybe is better suited for that goal line work. But look, Chase Brown's going to keep the receiving work. I think he is still going to be the lead here. Maybe something more in line with the 60 to 70% workload rather than the 90%. So I don't think you see almost 21 points per game from Chase Brown again. That's not the end of the world. I still think you can hold him as a rock solid RB2, knowing he has that RB1 upside should there ever be an injury in the backfield moving forward here. And to close it out, we have none other than Bucky Irving, who has just been, he's so good. Bucky Irving is fantastic. And it didn't start that way, though. It took a little bit for them to realize Bucky Irving is better than Rachaad White. The first 5 weeks, he did not clear 15 opportunities in a game. Didn't happen. He had 45% of the running back attempts on the ground. He had a 7% target share. He averaged 8 points per game. But week 6, that first time they trusted him with 15 or more opportunities in a game, didn't really look back. 17 points per game. And look, was a league winner down the stretch. The only concern I have is that breakout, right? He really didn't see a massive uptick in usage. He was just more productive. He goes from 45% of the running back attempts up to 51%. 6% jump isn't massive. He goes from a 7% target share up to a 10%. Okay. Not huge, but things have trended that way more and more in the last 5 weeks of the season. Those percentages have jumped even further. It is Bucky Irving's job. I think moving forward, Rachaad White will be involved next year. He's going to probably be the third down back because Bucky Irving's not a great blocker. Good pass catcher, doesn't block well. That's his Achilles heel right now. If he can get that solved, you're going to see Bucky Irving be an RB1 for a long time. I think that's the truth, even with Rachaad White there. He's 25th in the NFL in carries, 8th in breakaway runs, 10th in evaded tackles. What more do you want? He is dynamic. Everything we saw in college is carried over to the NFL. If he can get the blocking fixed, that's it. If he gets the blocking fixed, he's an RB1 moving forward. I am all in on Bucky Irving repeating in 2025.